iOS 26 is the biggest iOS redesign ever, and it also brings hundreds of new features and changes, many of which Apple never even talked about. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through everything new in iOS 26 because this is the iOS 26 movie. Okay, so throughout this video, I'm going to have iOS 18 on the left, iOS 26 on the right. And we're going to start this video off with the lock screen because that's the first thing you'll see after you update your phone to iOS 26, and right away, you'll be able to tell a difference. So first off, the clock has the liquid glass design. We'll talk more about liquid glass in a moment, but you can see right away that there's also an animation when the numbers come in compared to iOS 18. Now, if we unlock our device and go to customize that lock screen, you'll see first off, the customize button is more rounded off now, and it also has that liquid glass design, and the plus button over here also is no longer blue, it's liquid glass. Now, if we go to customize, you can see that before we had to, have the option to choose if we want to customize the lock screen or the home screen. Now it just goes straight to customizing the lock screen. So if we go to this, you'll see some differences here as well. So first off, you can change the size of the clock, the time right here. So it's much more adaptive, especially with objects. It can kind of go behind objects much easier now than it could in iOS 18. And if we tap on that clock, we have some changes here as well. So the globe down here is no longer blue, it's black. Also, the X in the top right no longer has that gray background. Also, down at the bottom, you can see we have glass and solid. So you can choose if you want the clock to be more of like a solid color, like an iOS 18, or if you want it to be liquid glass. Also, the slider is no longer a circle. It's this right here. And you can see that when you move it, it has that liquid glass effect and a little animation when you let go. And when you go all the way down to the end of the color palette, we have a minor change to the color picker right there. So it's just more of a circle instead of a selector on the outside with a color in the middle. And you'll also notice that we now have the option to move our widgets to the bottom of the lock screen. So before they were stuck at the top, now you can move them to the bottom. And you'll notice that when you change the time, when you make the time a little bit larger right here, that automatically moves the widgets down to the bottom. And if you wanted to change the photo before, you had this little photos glyph icon in the bottom left. Now it's a preview of the image you're using. And when you tap on that, there's a new animation, and it also gives you the option to show the current photo in library or choose a photo. Now you'll also notice this button right here. This is called a spatial scene, and this is going to be one of the big features in iOS 26. This may not be the best photo to use it for, but take a look at when I move my device. It looks as if it's a 3D object. And by the way, you'll notice when you go to add a new wallpaper, you will have a dedicated section to spatial scene. So we're just going to choose this photo right here of me, and you can kind of see the background, how it moves as I move my lock screen. And take a look at the time right here as well. So if I put this, maybe right here, it'll do a good job of hiding that's behind my head. So definitely go ahead and add a spatial scene to your lock screen. This is available for the iPhone 12 and newer. I should also mention that there is a new iOS 26 default wallpaper, so you can go ahead and add that, and there are different variations. So there's dynamic, which changes throughout the day. There's shadow, sky, halo, and dusk. There's also a change to the notifications and how they show up on your notification center. So if I swipe up on iOS 18, you can see nothing really changes in the background. But with iOS 26, if I swipe up, you can see the background starts to get darker. And if you have your timer, the clock there, a little bit larger, it will start to dynamically adjust that as well. So it gets darker, and you can see that when I go back to get these out of there, the wallpaper becomes as normal. So it does darken so you can read your notifications easier. And there's also a new animation when you lock your screen and you have the always on display enabled. So in iOS 18, if you locked your screen from here, you can see that it kind of just dims to black. But with iOS 26, if you do that, the icons kind of come at you. So you may have to watch that a couple of times, but the icons have this animation where they come towards the screen before it goes to the always on display. Now take a look at the iOS 18 home screen on the left, and take a look at the iOS 26 home screen on the right. What you're seeing is just a little bit of liquid glass. Liquid glass is the brand new design language in iOS 26, and this is perhaps the biggest redesign ever to iOS. I see this as being bigger than iOS 7 because this changes everything, and the icons are not the only thing this changes. It changes the settings, it changes the pop-ups, it changes the overall UI in every single application. So we'll touch on those, but we're going to start with the most obvious that everybody's going to notice, and that is the icons on the home screen. So by default, it might not be as big of a difference at first, but you can see that even the light mode icons, every single icon has changed with iOS 26. Some are a little bit more extreme than others, but just look at the overall design. You will see a change to every single app icon on your home screen. And take a look at the search button down there on the bottom middle of the screen. You can see that has a change. Also, the dock is a little bit taller and it has that liquid glass aesthetic. And before I show you the UI elements that have changed in pretty much every single application, let's show a little bit more here on the home screen. So if you press down and hold and go into jiggle mode, you'll see that all the minus icons on the home screen have that liquid glass design. The widget right here, you can see has a change as well. So it has a little grabber in the bottom right that has liquid glass. Also, the edit and done up top have liquid glass. And if you go ahead and tap on edit, we have some changes here as well. So first off, the glyph icons are now to the left instead of to the right. There are no underlines underneath of each action. The overall font has changed. There's now an edit wallpaper option. And if we go into customize right here, you can see that down at the bottom, we have a new look and some new options. So it now says customize right here, whereas before it just said small and large to change the app icon size. Now that's over here in the top right of this section. You can see when you tap on that, it changes it to small and large. Over here on the left, we have the darkened wallpaper. So there's a slight change in the animation there. But the main difference you'll see here is that there's a new option for clear icons. So now when you tap on that, you get the option to have the clear icons like you saw earlier in the video. And you can change that between light and dark, or you can set it to be automatic for those clear icons. And there's also a change when you go to tinted, because there's now two new options to the left. So these are actually going to match the color of your case or your iPhone. So this first option right here will do its best to match the color of your device. You can see I have the gold iPhone, so it's going to give me more of a gold tone to match my phone. And then this right here, if you have an Apple case on, it will pick up on the color of that case and it will adjust the tinted icons to be the color of your case. Pretty cool. And there's also this option right here, which changes the icons to be more of a color similar to the wallpaper that you currently have on. We're going to stick with the clear icons throughout this video because I just think it looks really cool. So let's talk about the big UI elements that have changed throughout the OS. And I think the biggest one you'll notice pretty much everywhere in every application is going to be the floating tab bar in every application. So this is what it looks like in the music application. You can see the tab bar kind of just floats down there at the bottom. Even in the settings application, if you go into settings, the search bar is no longer at the top. It's now floating down there at the bottom. And here's what it looks like in the App Store. And you're just going to see this pretty much in every application that has a bottom menu. So it's no longer stuck to the bottom. It's now kind of floating. And in some applications, it's adaptive, like in music, for example. So when you scroll down, the menu kind of goes away until you start scrolling up again. And then the menu reappears when you get to the top. But it's not just the look that makes this special, because before you couldn't even swipe over to change to the different tabs. You had to physically tap on them. It felt really outdated compared to what we have now, because with iOS 26, you're able to use this as kind of a, I like playing with this because it looks so amazing with this liquid glass design. But you're able to swipe over to go to different parts of a menu down there. So you can do this in the App Store as well. So if you want to go to the next section, you can just swipe over on it like that instead of physically tapping on it. And again, you get that really amazing liquid glass design that is really adaptive to the color. So look at the refraction in the background. It gets it really down to like the millimeter. Like it's perfect when you see the colors and how they refract in the background in real time. And you could also see how cool that liquid glass is when you start scrolling down on a very vibrant background like this right here. Take a look at how that refracts in the menu right there. That right there is what makes liquid glass so special. And it might seem small if you just installed it and you're not really familiar with it yet. But after you go back to like iOS 18 or something else after this, everything feels so outdated because this just feels so smooth and so futuristic. And just look at the effect when you pull down the notification center with liquid glass. Take a look at how everything just refracts off the icons and it's so responsive. Everything just looks so Incredible. You'll also see that liquid glass effect with toggles inside of settings or any application throughout iOS. So not only did they have a new shape now, so they're a little bit longer than they were on iOS 18, but also in iOS 18, when you turn those off, you could see the animation was just kind of turning a switch off, and that was kind of it. But now with iOS 26, when you press on it, you can see the liquid glass pop up a little bit, and you also have the option to kind of press and hold on that, and you can see the liquid glass there. You can go back and forth with that little effect. The UI for sliders throughout iOS has also been changed. So that's how it looked on iOS 18. Here's how it looks on iOS 26. And once again, when you went, up or down, you can see it kind of lagged. It just really didn't look that great or very smooth at all in iOS 18. And again, this is not just in settings. This is all throughout iOS in applications as well. But now with iOS 26, you can see just how much smoother it is in general. And also you get that kind of teardrop looking effect with liquid glass that really adapts and moves with you. It has a really strong animation. And even the back button throughout iOS has changed. So before it just said back in blue, but now it just has a back arrow. It doesn't actually say back anymore throughout iOS. It's just this now. And you might have noticed this already, but the notification center bubbles also have a liquid glass design. So you can kind of see the wallpaper in the background, whereas before it was just like gray and it covered up the background completely. Also, if Face ID fails, you can swipe up more consecutively now. Before there was a little bit of a wait, and also the numbers just went back down. This time they kind of come up from the bottom, and it appears pretty much instantly when the Face ID fails. And you'll even see a change with every single pop-up that pops up on your device, like asking for, access to your photos, for example. This whole modal here, this whole box looks different than it did before because it has that liquid glass aesthetic. And something else you'll notice in these pop-up menus is that the text is no longer centered, it's now left aligned. And here's another example of liquid glass doing its thing. So if you're in notes or if you're in messages, anywhere where you're just hovering over text like this, before, this is what it looked like. It kind of magnified in, which didn't look bad, but now with iOS 26, take a look at what it looks like. So not only do you have that nice bubble, but take a look at the text as you go slow over top of this text. So the text magnifier warps over everything that's around its edges. So it has this warping effect, and it just is so good at detecting what's in the background and kind of, rendering that in real time. And something else that liquid glass does is that it hides the home bar at the bottom of the screen. So before in iOS 18, in every application, no matter what, the home bar would always show up down there at the bottom. It would always just stay there. But now in iOS 26, it shows up at first, but it disappears. You could see it gives us more of a full screen effect now without having that little black bar down there at the bottom. Now let's head into the control center because we have an all new look here for the control center in iOS 26. And a lot of this is thanks to the liquid glass design, but there are some other changes as well. So first off, just take a look at all of the toggles. We have that liquid glass design, so you can kind of see through the toggles a little bit. So they kind of refract that light in the background. They just have a more frosted look, I guess you could say, compared to iOS 18, where it was just more of like a black background. Also, everything's a bit more rounded off now than it was before, especially these toggles for volume and for brightness. That's what they looked like before. Here's what they look like now. And if we go to customize our control center and go to add a control, this is where you'll see some changes as well. So if we go into here and we scroll down, there's now a toggle for background mode for dock kit. If you have a gimbal or something that takes advantage of dock kits, there's a new utility control center toggle for local capture. And if you add this, it will add this local capture to your control center. And what this does is it records the high quality audio and video from your device while you're on a video call. So if you're a podcast or something like that, this is a great way to record it and save it in full res. You do also have a toggle here for audio only. So if you don't want to record the video, just the audio, you could do that right there, and you could tap on start recording. And then under accessibility, we have share accessibility settings and accessibility reader, both of which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then right here under hearing accessibility, we have a new one for name recognition, which allows you to have, your phone recognize when somebody calls your name. Also in the control center, if you open up the AirPlay menu, you can see we have a new look for that. So this is what it looks like now, more of just a liquid glass design. Also, everything kind of has a button now instead of just being text underneath. We also don't have that ugly underline anymore. And then down here at the bottom, it says all speakers and TV instead of control other speakers and TV. And when you tap on that, you can see the difference in what this looks like here as well. If you go into the connectivity platter, if you have haptic press on it and then haptic press on the Wi-Fi menu, you can see it opens up a little sub menu instead of going into this full-blown menu, and it also shows the lock right on top of the connectivity status, whereas before the lock was over to the left of it. And you'll also notice throughout iOS there's different animations as well. Like if I haptic press on this right there, you can see there's a different animation. It's kind of like a little jiggly animation for liquid glass. It's like glass is just falling, or liquid, I guess, is just falling like water. So you'll notice that throughout iOS as well. It's just really apparent in here in the control center. Also, if you go into a game, we have a new game mode section. So you can see the game mode icon is now a little bit brighter than it was before. And if you swipe down and you have the game overlay. So before it was just game mode, it just said game mode up there up top. Now it says game overlay. And if you tap on that, we have a new look here as well. So it says Apple Games up in the top left. We have a little launcher up top where you can see different options. This is for your friends and your contacts, and then this right here is for your different settings. So if you want to turn game mode on or off, controller settings, and your display and sound settings. And if you go right here, you can see your achievements and leaderboards very easily. And if you love background sounds like I do, you're going to love iOS 26 because we have some new background sounds that are pretty amazing. So if you haptic press on the ear right here, you might be familiar with this. If we go ahead and find the ear, haptic press, we have background sounds. If you go into that, we have not only a new look for the slider right there, but also we have new background sounds as a whole. So before it ended at fire, but now we have several new ones. So from Babel all the way down to Quiet Night, all of those are brand new in iOS 26. But it gets even better because also if we go into background sounds settings, we have a new menu here inside of settings. It's not a new menu, but we have new options in here. For example, if you go down, you can see that we have equalizers. So you can change the equalizer of your background sound. So if you want it to be broad or focused, you can do that. You could also change the balance if you want it to be further to the left or further to the right for the balance if you have headphones in. And then also we have a timer for background sound. So before in iOS 18, we just had this option here to stop sounds when locked. So when you lock your device, it would just stop all the sounds. We have that here in iOS 26 still, but we have this new option here for stop sounds with a timer. So now you have a full-blown, really customizable timer to stop your background sounds. So you can see you could turn the timer on, you could set it to turn off at a specific time or after a certain amount of time, and then you could choose to always use these settings. And you'll also notice that the description of background sounds up top has been changed as well. So it gives you more of a practical reason to use this. It tells you that these sounds can minimize distractions, increase sense of focus, and help you cope with symptoms related to tinnitus. There's also a change to the always on display. So if you go into your display and brightness settings and then go down to always on display, there's a new option to blur the wallpaper photo. So you can see if I go ahead and do that, it will blur that photo when I go to my always on display, which is really nice. And also you'll see a change to the look in here. So customize is now more bold than it was before. Now, if you're like me and you take a ton of screenshots pretty much every single day, you're going to be very interested to see the changes in iOS 26 because there's some pretty fundamental changes. So I'm just going to show you, we're going to take a screenshot on iOS 18. As you know, it always went down there in the bottom left, but now with iOS 26, when I take a screenshot, you can see that we have the option to immediately pull up the kind of markdown menu here instead of having to tap on it in the bottom like we had to before. Now, you don't have to do this. This is just an option. I'll show you that in a moment, but this is pretty cool. So there's a change here as well. So we're just going to do what you had to do before. So tap on that and that would take you to this menu and you can see right away the change here. So first off, we no longer have a fully square like crop tool. Now it's more rounded off. The buttons throughout are just cleaner. They're kind of floating right there instead of being in this bar. That's part of the liquid glass design. And if we go to crop it right here, you can see that everything appears to be the same at first. But if we go into markup right here and we tap on the plus icon, you can see that we now have the loop back. So the magnifier is now back with iOS 26. But you also notice that the glyph icons are now to the left instead of being to the right. And once again, those ugly underlined separators are gone now. So it looks a lot cleaner here in iOS 26. And also before, if you started marking something up, you had to either click on done and then you would have to tap on, whether you wanted to save it, or you just had to tap on delete up there in the top right. But now in iOS 26, even if you mark something up like that, you can just simply tap on X and it will just get rid of it. It's much easier now to get out of that. But like I mentioned, there are options here, because if you go into your settings and go into general, we now have a brand new section dedicated to screenshots, and it's called screen capture. So if you go into that, this is where you can change to have full screen previews or not. So if you like it to be like iOS 18, you could just disable that, and now it's back how it used to be, where it just shows up in the bottom and then you have to tap on it to go into it. But if you like how it just comes up right away, you can turn that on. And then also right here, we have a couple of other options. So we can now shoot our screenshots in HDR. So you could either have it set to SDR or HDR. We also have the ability now to turn off CarPlay screenshots. So when you took a screenshot in iOS 18, when you were connected to CarPlay, it would automatically take a screenshot of your CarPlay screen and your iPhone screen. Pretty annoying, but now you can turn that off if you don't want CarPlay screenshots. And then also we have automatic visual lookup. So what that is if you have an Apple Intelligence device and you take a screenshot, you'll notice down at the bottom, we have a new animation that says highlight to search. We also have an ask button and a search button. That was not there previously in iOS 18, and that's because this uses visual intelligence. So if you're familiar, that was previously just for the camera control button, but now it has made its way to screenshots, and it's a lot more useful now because we basically have circle to search like on Android on iPhone now. So you could circle something if you want to search it, and then you get your results from Google right here, and they're actually pretty accurate most of the time. Now, if you don't get something that you liked, you could tap on this little chat icon in the bottom left, and this allows you to follow up with ChatGPT. So you could ask ChatGPT questions against the screenshots that you have right here. So let's say we find some plants online that we like, but we don't know what they're called. We can take a screenshot of that and we can go ahead and circle exactly what we want to know what it is. And we can, of course, look at the Google results to kind of get an idea of what those might be. But I could also ask ChatGPT, and you can see it quickly gives me an answer as to what the plants are that I highlighted. Also, if it's just a body of text, you will see another option that shows up down here called read aloud. So you can see that read aloud now pops up. Now that it knows that this is just text right there, you can also see the link to it. But if I tap on read aloud, it will start reading what it sees in that screenshot. And by the way, when you tap on the share sheet right here to open it up, you can see before it looked like that. Now with iOS 26, it looks like this. A lot more modern, comes up quicker. It's a different place on the screen. And there's also a different animation when it goes in and when it goes out. Also, you'll see that for the markup tool as well. Before, there was kind of no animation when you tapped on it. But now with iOS 26, when you tap on the magnifier, you have a little more of an animation, more of a bounce animation there. Okay, so now let's move on to the phone application. And we have an all new unified redesign for phone. So we now have a combined view where it combines the favorites, the recents, and the voicemails all in one section right here. So everything shows up now under recents instead of having a all and missed tab up at the top. You'll see that we can also now pin favorites to the top like you can in messages. Also at the bottom, the tab bar at the bottom now floats with liquid glass. We also have the search all the way over there to the far right. Now, if we tap on the three dots up in the top right-hand corner, you can see I have 203 notifications. But what's cool about this section is that you can change it back to the classic view if you don't like the unified view. This is also where you can filter what shows up in the phone application. So if you only want to see your missed calls, your voicemails, your unknown calls, your spam, you can do that. You could also go to manage filtering. And when you tap on that, it will take you into your settings where you can turn on or off unknown callers for filtering those calls, and spam call filtering. And in this section in settings is where you can turn on or off screen unknown callers. This is one of the biggest features in iOS 26 because when you have this turned on and set to ask reason for calling, you can see it says calls from unsaved numbers will be asked for more information before iPhone rings. So if an unknown caller calls you, somebody you don't have saved in your contacts, they will be prompted to say why they're calling, so you can see what they're calling for before you pick up. And you can see what that looks like right here in real time. So it asks, hi, if you record your name and reason for calling, I'll see if this person is available. That's what the person on the other end hears. And then this is what the person is saying. You can see this in real time live on your lock screen as they are calling. And once they answer that question, it says automatically, thanks, Joe. It picks up that it's Joe because they said their name, and it says, please stay on the line. And you could also quick reply from here as well. So if you wanted to say, I'll call you you later, it will say that verbally to the other person on the other end of the line, and they can continue conversing with you, where you basically have these automated messages going through. So after I say that, they can continue talking, and you could still decide if you want to accept that call or not. And of course, you can turn this off if you don't like this feature. You can just set it back to silencing unknown callers, or just don't even screen unknown callers whatsoever. Another big feature in iOS 26 is hold assist. So if you go into your settings, there's a new option for hold assist detection. So this will automatically detect when you're placed on hold, so you can step away, and it says iPhone will then notify you when it's time to pick up. So this is extremely useful. We've had this for a while on like Pixel phones, but now it's here on iOS. If you go to the voicemails tab, you could see that the voicemails are now transcribed in line. So it shows right here before even tapping on that voicemail. And if you do tap on that, you could see a big difference here as well in this screen. So several UI changes. The number is now up in the top center. Callback is over here on the top right, and it's also green now instead of blue. Down here, we have add a contact. So you could add that person as a contact, or you can report it as spam. The playback buttons are different. The share button is over there to the left now. And also down here for transcript, you can see that before it said transcription. Now it just says transcript. It's also lower text, so the text is a little bit smaller, and it also shows the confidence level of that transcription. So this one was low confidence. Also on iOS 18, if you tapped on edit up here in the top left corner, it just kind of moved everything. There wasn't really much of an animation whatsoever. But now with iOS 26, if you tap on edit, you could see it's this pop-out menu now instead of just being a select field. And from here, you have options for name and photo sharing. You can edit your favorites. This is where you edit those posters right there, or you can select your calls. There's a new UI when you go to edit your contact poster or your avatar. So it looks much better, much more modern now on iOS 26. We could also go to poster right here. You can see how that looks compared to when we go to edit right here. And down at the bottom of this section is where we have our first name, last name, and our other options. Before, it was just name. It wasn't separated by first name and last name. And then also for share automatically, you can see that the text is now in that same section instead of being underneath of it. Now, one of the most annoying things in iOS 18 was that if you have your recent calls list right here, if you accidentally tapped on that person, it would just call them back right away. But now with iOS 26, that is not the case, because now if you tap on that, you can see it opens up right here just to their contact information. And that's because we now have these call glyphs over here to the right-hand side. That is how you can quickly call back. And by the way, if you liked it how it was the old way where you tap on those recents to call them, you can go into your settings and turn that on if you actually want that to be enabled. And here's a feature that's kind of hidden inside of the phone application. If you swipe over on a recent call, we have a new option to remind you to call that person back. So if you tap on that blue button right there, we get a callback reminder for 1 hour, tonight, tomorrow, or at a custom date. Also, when you swipe over, you can see a couple of changes. So the contact turns gray now, the little contact box, and also the delete button is now circular instead of square. And when you go into that contact, you can see a couple of changes here as well. So emergency contact now has a background behind it so you could read it easier, whereas before it was just the red text. Also, the big change here is that we now have call history. So if you go to call history, it will show you a call log of all the times that that person has called you or you've called them. And you also have the option to change between details and voicemails. And it actually gives you a little transcription of what that voicemail was about. And there's also a change to the menus down here. So the order has been changed, and it also just looks a lot more modern now. And also as you scroll up, it still shows emergency contact above the name of that contact. It didn't show that at all before. And speaking of the phone application, if you go into your cellular settings and go down to add eSIM, we have a new option in here to where you can transfer from Android. So if you go to other options, we now have an option for transfer from Android where you can easily transfer your eSIM from Android to iOS. And by the way, a subtle change in the phone application that you'll absolutely notice pretty much right away is that you now get haptic feedback when somebody picks up the phone or when they hang up the phone. And if you go into your cellular settings and go down under cellular data and go to show all, there's a new glyph icon for apps only on watch. So that glyph icon was a little bit different in iOS 18. Also in our settings for phone, we have a couple of small changes here. So right here before in iOS 18 where it showed default calling app, incoming calls, and announced calls, you can see that we now have a header for that. It's now called preferred language. That's because you could change your preferred language up top, but these two are in line with that. Also, the default calling app is right here. Before, that's what was combined with incoming calls and announced calls. And then underneath of calls, we have a change to call recording. It's now audio call recording. And also related to phone, if you go into a focus mode and go down here to add a focus filter, there's a new filter for silence eSIM. It's not just the phone application that got a redesign. We also have a redesign for the FaceTime application with iOS 26. So take a look at the right-hand side. That is iOS 26. It is so much less cluttered now, and it's a lot more direct with what you're doing on the home screen. So it just shows your contacts in this little 2x2 view, which is really nice. And then you could see up in the top right, once again, just like phone, we have a filter option. Also, the new FaceTime button is down there in the bottom center now, and there's no create link by default. The link shows up after you tap on new FaceTime, and you can see that now in the bottom left. And if you go into a FaceTime call, the UI here is different as well. So you'll see this little menu in the bottom right-hand corner. Also, the default placement for your own camera is in the bottom left instead of the top right. Also, when you tap on this, the screenshot button is up in the top right now instead of the bottom left. Also, the contact name is more compact and it's in that little bubble up in the top left, whereas before it showed it like that. And if you tap on the three dots right here, you have all your other options where you can add people with the contact card. You have live translation, so you can live translate in FaceTime, live captions, screen sharing, and share play, all in that menu. Before in iOS 18, if you wanted to do that, you had to tap on the eye right here, and that's where you could see some of those options. And when you tap on live translation, you can see this is where you can choose what you want to translate on this call. So if you want it to be from Spanish to English, you can do that right there. And now when you tap on your camera view to see what you look like, we have a new UI for that as well. So if you want to make it smaller back to the normal view, that's now up in the top left instead of being in the top right. It's also now liquid glass instead of being black. Also, where you change the portrait, like the blur in the background and all your effects, those were in all the separate corners. Now they're all at the bottom, so it's more unified. It's easier to see, what you could do. Also, we have Memoji right there. Before, I don't believe you had Memoji by default. Yeah, you just had this right here, and you could select Memoji from that. So now it's easier to select that. Also, the flip button now is liquid glass, and it says flip instead of before. It was just the glyph icon. It didn't say the flip text. Also, before in iOS 18, if you wanted to get out of this view, you could just tap on the screen. It would go back, but you cannot do that in iOS 26. You have to actually tap on that, button there to minimize it. And here's an interesting one in FaceTime. So there's a new notification if something may be showing sensitive on that FaceTime call. So maybe if you're calling somebody that's not super close to you and you're doing some things on camera, it will actually give you this pop-up. It will cover up the image, the person's video, and it will say audio and video are paused because the contact may be showing something sensitive. And it says if you feel uncomfortable, you should end the call, and that's where you can resume it or you can end it right there. Now let's head into the messages application because this is where we see some massive differences in iOS 26 that I think a lot of people are going to love. So first off, right away, you could see that the UI has been redesigned here. So it's not as drastic as FaceTime and the phone application, but there's a pretty big change here. So you can see we have that same filtering up in the top right. We have the floating search bar in the bottom, and create new text is now in the bottom right instead of the top right. And in the top left, we no longer have a back menu. We just have edit. And that's because now if you tap on edit, that's where you can change your contact poster, you can select messages, and you can edit your pinned conversations. Now in iOS 18, if you wanted to filter your messages, you had to go back to this menu right here from the main view, and that's where you could choose between known senders, unread messages, recently deleted, or all messages. It was kind of just not really a great UX, but that's been fixed with iOS 26 because now that filtering option is up in the top right from the main view. So you don't have to go back anymore. It's just always there up in the top right. And there's also a new filtering option. So there's also a glyph right there that says filter by unread. But this is also where you can change it to show unknown senders, spam, recently deleted, and also manage filtering. And if I go to unknown senders, for example, you can see it will show all of the unknown senders that have sent me a text message. And from here, I can mark them as unknown or delete it right away. And also it says unknown senders now at the top before it just said unknown. And also when you go into that unknown sender, it now shows mark as known or delete at the bottom, whereas before it just said this sender is not in your contact list and you can report it as junk. Also, if you get a message where it says reply to unsubscribe or reply to stop, if you tap on delete, there's now a new option in iOS 26 to delete and stop. So it will automatically tell them to stop sending messages and it will also delete it. And you can see there's also a new filtering option for drafts. So you can now filter your messages by drafts, which is when you type something out, but you haven't yet sent it. So if I go in there, you can see I started typing, but I did not send it. You can now filter by your drafts, the messages that you maybe meant to send, but you never got around to doing it. And then if we go up to that filtering menu and go to manage filtering, this will take us into the settings where you can turn on the toggle for for screen unknown senders. Now, this is going to hide notifications and move those messages to the unknown senders list. However, you can see that we do also have this right here where it's allow notifications. I would highly recommend going in here and making sure that time sensitive is turned on, because if you get two-factor authentication alerts or anything like that, you will want to get notified of those, and that will actually show up here if you have this turned on. But you can hide notifications from promotions, transactions, and personal. And this is also where you have a text message filter if you want that, and also an option to filter spam and move them to the spam list. Now let's talk about some more fun features in iOS 26 with the Messages app. So just take a look at iOS 18 on the left and then iOS 26 on the right. This looks like 10 years ahead of iOS 18. This iOS 26 update really just makes iOS 18 look outdated, especially in the Messages application. So you can see several UI changes. I won't discuss each one. You can see those for yourselves, especially the contact up at the top. It's no longer just inline. It kind of sticks out. It has like a 3D effect. But also the main obvious thing here is the background. We now have conversation backgrounds for Messages. So you can change this by going up to the contact right there. If you tap on that, we have a new tab for backgrounds. And by the way, you'll also notice that when you tap on a contact from the Messages app, this whole view looks 10 times better. So before, this is what it looked like on iOS 18. Now it looks like this in iOS 26. You could also go back and forth between your photos, your links, your documents. Everything is kind of sorted right there. Whereas before, you just had to scroll down and everything was kind of separate. Photos were here, links were here, documents were down here. You had to just keep scrolling. Now it's more of a side to side and you get those previews right there. But the backgrounds are a big feature here. So Apple does have some defaults. There's also some suggestions down here, which will use some that are created with Apple Intelligence and some from your photo library. And you also have these ones right here, which are the more popular ones, where you could also change the color of those as well. Now keep in mind, the other person will only see this if they have iOS 26 on their device, and they can also change the background at any time. And if you want to use Image Playground, aka Apple Intelligence, to create a background, you could go in here and do that as well. And this does work for individual chats or for group chats. And speaking of group chats, if you go into a group chat and you tap on the contacts up in the top, you can see we have a much better layout now for everybody who is actually in the group chat. So it shows up top, and also you don't have to tap on that little drop down anymore. It just shows everybody right there, and an easy way to add a contact to that group chat. And it's also much easier to see the photos that were shared in that group chat as well, because it's just a tab over here, whereas before you had to scroll down all the way to the bottom. And you can see the difference in the view for photos as well. You do also have a filtering option, so you can filter the photos that are in a group chat. So screenshots, videos, photos, or all. But one of my favorite changes in iOS 26 is the fact that we can now have inline polls. So you can now set a poll in a group chat. You can do this in an individual chat as well, but this is better in group chat. So if you tap on the plus right here, you can see we have a new option for polls, and this allows you to choose your choices. So I'll just say, what are we getting tonight? Domino's, Pizza Hut, or Papa John's? And if I send that, you can see the little animation, and it will send this poll, and people can vote on it, and it will change in real time, and you can see who voted for what. You could also add a choice if you're in that group chat. So if you want to add a choice that wasn't there by default, you can go ahead and do that. Now you'll also notice that we now have typing indicators in group chats. So now if you have, other people in the group chat that are on iOS 26, you will now get typing indicators when they are typing, just like you could before in individual conversations. If you go into the emoji picker and you tap on an emoji, it will now show in the search field what that emoji or Genmoji is. So you can see it gives us a text, kind of description of it. So this emoji, if you ever wondered what an emoji was, you can now tap on that and it will show you in the search field there exactly what it is. And this does also work for Genmojis or Mixmojis. It will show you the prompt that you used to create it. So side eye face, for example, this one was Christmas latte, and so on. If you have an animated background in Messages and somebody does a tap back reaction to your message, take a look at the effect here. So you can see there's kind of a bouncy effect right there. So I'll change it so you can see it again. There is a little animation there, kind of a ripple in the water. It's the small details like that that makes Apple so awesome when it comes to the UI and just the feel. It just feels like, you're there. Also in group chats, if you have not saved somebody's number, there's now a quick add button right next to that phone number. And when you tap on that, that will allow you to create a new contact or add to existing contact straight from the main messages menu here in this group chat. Something else you could do in a group chat now is Apple Cash. So you can now request, send, and receive money directly within group chats. Also in iOS 26, if you haptic press on a message, we have a new look for the menu right here. We also have a new option for select. So now if you tap on select in a message, you can now select the text that you want to copy from that bubble instead of copying the entire message. So now we can just copy that part of the message only. Also in messages, there's a new feature to automatically translate the incoming text. So if you're texting with somebody who speaks another language that maybe you don't understand perfectly, you could have that translate in real time in messages. Also, when you send a very long text message, instead of taking up the entire screen and making that person keep scrolling, it now shortens that text right here, and it gives you some dots and a little arrow. And then when you tap on that, it opens it up in the full view, and then you could view the full text instead of taking up the entire screen. Also in messages, you now get a warning, kind of a pop-up here, when a group chat has a blocked contact in it. So you can see it says, I blocked Bianca. If you stay in this conversation, they will see messages you send. So you have the option then to leave the conversation. And also when you tap on the members, it will now give you a notification, a little badge saying who is blocked. And also when you block a contact, it will now show it on the main messages view. And when you go into that contact, it will not allow you to text them. It just says you blocked this contact at the bottom and the text field is gone. Also, if your phone detects that you are traveling, you'll get this Siri suggestion now. So it says stay connected while traveling. A flight was found in mail. You can turn on data roaming or purchase a travel eSIM. And then when you tap on that, it will take you to this page right here that says stay connected while traveling. And it says you can, get a travel eSIM right there. It gives you more information about it. You can now use natural language in the messages application. So if I search for something like buy some shares, it will show me not only direct quotes of buy some shares, but it will show me some messages that are similar to that using natural language. If you go to the emoji picker and then you tap on Genmoji, we have a new look here. So we now have Genmoji suggestions down here at the bottom, along with show more suggestions. So you can see the different suggestions right there. That was not a thing in iOS 18. There's also this right here where you could tap on the plus and create new emojis out of existing emojis. So mix-moji. So if you tap on a couple of different emojis right here, it will combine all of those to create a mix-moji that you could use in a conversation. So that is the mix-moji we created right there. Let's go ahead and tap on the check mark, and then it will go ahead and copy that where we can send it to this contact. And you can do this with people as well. So if you go into Genmoji and then you tap on the person icon down here, you can select a person to create a Genmoji or a mix-moji from. So let's go ahead and choose this one. And then I can combine that with these other emojis that are down here as suggestions, or I can create a custom one of my own, add in a disco right there. And all of this is part of Mixmoji. And we'll go down here and add in some of these different themes from these suggestions. And you can see now we have our own Mixmoji that we can use based off these different emojis, and you can select to choose the right one. It's very Image Playground-esque, but now it's built in to Genmoji in messages. And speaking of Image Playground, we also have some changes there. So if you go into the Image Playground application, first off, we no longer have that little plus in the middle. It's now yellow and it says plus with new image text next to it. And then when you tap on that, we have a couple of changes here as well. So you'll see right up top, we can now change the style. So before you only had a couple of styles, but now with iOS 26, we have some new styles for image generation. So before we only had animation, illustration, and sketch. Now we have Genmoji and ChatGPT. So you can now use ChatGPT to create an image in Image Playground, and you can go even deeper than that. You can change the ChatGPT style. So if you want to create an oil painting, so we'll just go ahead and put me in the forest. We'll share with ChatGPT. I don't care if they see my image, and we'll maybe do like lighthouse as well. So we combine all those and use the style of ChatGPT, and let's change that to oil painting. We can now see how that turns out. And there we go. That is what the oil painting looks like. That looks pretty awesome, honestly. So you'll also see a couple of minor changes as well. So it now shows save up in the top right along with a share button. Before, if you wanted to save it, you had to tap on these three dots and do it there. Now it's more obvious up there in the top right. Also down at the bottom, the beta text is now above the describe an image or the ChatGPT little text bar down there. Also to the right of where you select the person, the photos album now has a new glyph versus a plus before. Also suggestions and show more are no longer in caps lock like they were in iOS 18. And if you haptic press on one of these images, we have a new look for the share sheet right here. You'll actually notice this throughout iOS as well. But you can see the edit, share, and copy in their own section, and then duplicate and add caption below that, whereas before it was just all stacked together. Now you might have already noticed this, but we do also have a new keyboard design that matches with the overall liquid glass design in iOS 26. So it just looks a little bit more modern now compared to iOS 18, and you can especially see the difference in dark mode on iOS 26 versus iOS 18. You might also notice another change when you're typing in the keyboard, and that is when you're typing on the keys. Before in iOS 18, by default, it would show a preview, so it kind of pops out right there. You see how G keeps popping out from the keyboard every time I tap on it? Well, in iOS 26, you can see that nothing pops out from the keyboard right there. And that's because in our settings, if you go to settings, general keyboards, character preview is a new option that is disabled by default. So if you want to re-enable that and go back, now when you tap on G, you can see it kind of pops out there as you're tapping on that key. iOS 26 gives us a brand new low power alert that comes out of the dynamic islands. And when you hit 10%, it shows you this animated alert right here. And you could also tap on it to turn on low power mode right from that little pop out. And then if you head into your settings and go into the battery section, we have a brand new redesign here that shows you a lot more information, a lot more useful information than what we could see before. So where do we start? First off, it shows your current percent up there in the top left. It also shows the last time you charged and to what percent, and also the exact time. It shows an hour ago right there. We also have this bar that fills up based on the amount of charge that you have. We have recent usage, we have auto lock, so both of these are little suggestions. Those showed up before in iOS 18, but they look a little bit different here in iOS 26. And if we go down to daily usage, this part has been completely revamped as well. So before, it would just show us our last 24 hours and our last 7 days. But now with iOS 26, you can see it's now called daily usage. And up top, it shows us right away, you're using more battery today than you usually do by 7:07 p.m. And it actually shows us our average by that time is 18%. I'm currently at 43%. And that's accompanied with a chart down here that shows the average line along with where I'm currently at right now. So that in itself is super useful, but there's more, because if you go down to the app and system activity, you could see before it didn't say that, it just said battery usage by app. Now it says app and system activity, and it shows you some outliers that are using up more battery than usual. So it says camera higher than usual, photos on screen for 22 minutes longer than usual, and so on. And if we go to view all battery usage, it will show you an even more advanced chart right here. We can get more information about what you're using, and you can see that when you tap on the different days, it kind of animates in real time, and it shows you all of your data right there. So it shows down here screen active and screen idle, and then it shows battery usage by app along with other battery usage such as the always on display and the home and lock screen. Those are separated. But it goes even further, because if you go into the application like camera, for example, it will even show you a chart for that specific application and when you are using it and if it is higher than usual or not. And if you go down more, it shows you activity about on screen and background for that specific application. So this is a lot more sophisticated, a lot more advanced. You can get a lot more information about your battery life now in iOS 26 with this new redesigned battery usage page. But there's even more, because also in the battery page, if we go down here to charging, this section right here has a brand new way to change the charge limit. So before, if you went into the charging screen, this is what it looked like. So you could see that charge limit is now more bold. Also, this slider has that liquid glass design. So before, it just looked like that. Now with iOS 26, it looks like this. So a lot more modern looking. It has that, glass-like, that little liquid drop right there moving along with the animations. And then also we have, if we go back right here and then we go back down to power mode, before we didn't even have that. We just had low power mode as the only option. But now for power mode, we not only have low power mode, but we now have adaptive power. This is a brand new power type in iOS 26. And it says when your battery usage is higher than usual, iPhone can extend your battery life by making performance adjustments such as lowering display brightness, allowing some activities to take longer, or turning off low power mode at 20%. And you could also turn on or off notifications so you can be notified when your phone goes into adaptive power mode when it's actually in use. Also in iOS 18, when you plugged in your device on this screen, nothing really changed, but in iOS 26, if you plug in your device while you're on the battery screen and you go up top, it now shows charging. And we also get an alert below that says iPhone will occasionally charge to 100% even if the charge limit is set below 100%. So that is a new notification there as well, and this will update in real time. And also you can see it shows that it's going to take 24 minutes to reach 100% from my current battery level. Also, when you plug your device in to charge, you will now see the amount of time remaining until you hit your charge limit on the lock screen. So if we go ahead and lock and then unlock, right here above the time, it will now show I have 22 minutes until I hit my charge limit, which happens to be 80% right now. So that is called battery intelligence. That's new in iOS 26. Battery intelligence will also show you if you're using a slow charger, and it cannot tell you the exact amount of time until you reach your set percentage. Also, if you want to get this wallpaper or any of the wallpapers you see throughout the video, they will all be linked down in the description below. This one is called Lustra. This was built for iOS 26 in mind, and this is a pack. This is part of a pack of retro icons for your lock screen that makes your lock screen just pop. This update also brings 25-watt Qi 2.2 wireless charging support for the iPhone 16 and newer. Now here's a useful one. Even if you don't have your AirPods currently connected to your device, you will now get a low power alert that says AirPods battery low and that they need charging. This is very handy to have. The camera application gets its first big redesign ever with iOS 26. So take a look, especially at the bottom of iOS 26 in the camera application. It is a lot more simplistic and minimal now than it was before. Also, the button, you can see the button has a slightly different look. The photos in the bottom left are now circular instead of square. The flip camera is now lower on the screen than it was before. And also our switcher between video, photo, and all the different modes is now at the bottom for much easier access than being right here above the shutter button. Also before, when you tried to swipe through the different modes, you could only do one at a time before lifting your finger up and having to swipe over again. But now in iOS 26, you could continue swiping and going through these different modes just like this. And you also have that different animation because of liquid glass. And if you take a look up top, we have some changes here as well. So the flash moved from the top left to the top right, and then the format moved to the left, whereas before it was over there to the right. And when you tap on that format, we have a new menu. So before it was basically just to cross it out or to enable HEIF Max, but now it has its own full menu where you can change the format and the resolution right here. Now also, when you tap on flash, for example, if you tap and hold on that, it will open up the menu for flash like always. But if you tap on these little grid icons right here, if you tap on that, that will open up this menu down here in the bottom. Whereas before you had to swipe up to access that, and it just showed down here in this little slider view. And it was also kind of hidden. Like if you didn't know to do that, all these options were just kind of hidden. And you'll also notice some of these glyph icons have changed, like the 4:3 aspect ratio. Before it just said 4:3, but now it has a little square around it. The timer glyph is a little bit more thin than it was before. And there's also some changes in the video section up top. So before in iOS 18, if you wanted to change the resolution or the frame rate, you just had to tap on that and you would have to keep going through until you got to the frame rate that you wanted. But now in iOS 26, you could see it's now on the left-hand side, just like for photos. And when you tap on that, it opens up this new menu where it's much easier to select exactly what you want all at once in the same menu instead of keep tapping time and time again to get to what you want. So much more intuitive now. Also, you'll notice that ProRes is in here in the same spot, whereas before it was its own separate section over here on the left. Also in iOS 26, if your lens is dirty, like if it has a bunch of smudges all over it, you will now get an alert that tells you you need to clean your lens to get the best quality possible. And you could also change that inside of the camera settings. You could see if you want to turn that off for some odd reason, you should keep that on, but there's a new toggle here called Lens Cleaning Hints. Also, if you have a device with camera control and you go into the camera control section and then go down to camera adjustments, if you have that turned on, you can now go into customize and you can disable certain ones, and you could also move them around. You can move around the order of the controls within camera control, the menu that you go into with camera control. Under composition, we have a new section called indicators. This is where you can turn on or off your indicators inside of the camera application. So I turn off flash, for example, you can see live photo and action mode were already off, but now if I turn off off flash and I go in here, you could see that we no longer have the indicator up top for flash, so it's much cleaner. You don't accidentally press it, but you could always access it by tapping on these grids right here and then going into flash right there. So it's just a way to clean it up top. You can remove these indicators if you maybe don't use them or you accidentally press them sometimes. You can turn those on or turn them off. And it's not just the camera that got redesigned. We also have a big change to the Photos application because it's been redesigned once again, now combining iOS 17 and the iOS 18 Photos application. So you guys know how pretty much nobody liked the iOS 18 change to Photos because it was kind of all just one page. It was right here. You had all your photos there. And then if you scroll down, you start to see your albums, your pinned collections, but that's only if you customize it. It was very confusing for a lot of people and it was really just scrolling down the whole time. But now in iOS 26, you could see that you're not scrolling down the whole time because once you're in your library, that's it. You can't go down any further. And that's because now there's a library tab and then there's a separate tab now for collections. Again, before it was all combined. We had our collections right here. You just had to keep scrolling down to get to them. So now with iOS 26 on library, if you go ahead and tap on collections, this opens up a whole new page where you can set up exactly what collections you want in what order. You could also collapse the menus if you don't want to see them, just like so. And you could also go down to the bottom on the collections page and tap on reorder if you want to reorder these collections in whatever order you would like. Now let's go into an actual photo because there's something really cool that you could do with photos now, and that is create a spatial scene. So as you guys remember from the beginning when I showed you on the lock screen where you can create a custom, spatial lock screen, well, you could do that in the Photos app for pretty much any photo as well. So if we tap this button right here, this is a new button up here in the top right of Photos. If you tap on that, that will create a spatial scene. It will kind of scan it and then it will create a spatial scene, and take a look at that. Take a look at the background moving as me, the subject, kind of stays still. It gives it a real cool 3D effect. And while we're on an individual photo, you could take a look at the UI differences here as well. So take a look at the bottom. Before, everything had a blue color to it. Now everything is black. Also for the metadata up top where it shows the location and everything, that's now more clear and it's kind of in its own separate section. And if you tap on the three dots, this menu is much shorter. It doesn't go down pretty much the entire screen like it did before. It's now scrollable, so you can get down to it just like so. Also, all the glyph icons are now on the left instead of on the right. And on the main library page, we have some changes to the UI elements here as well. So our filter is now up in the top right instead of in the bottom left. We no longer have the years, months, and all down there until we start swiping up. So once you scroll up a little bit, you could see that it starts to appear right there, and also has that really cool liquid glass effect, as you could see, based on the colors around it. And if you go into an album and you tap on the three dots, you could see the UI change here. Again, glyph icons over there to the left. We also don't have all those underlines underneath of everything. It just looks a lot cleaner now than it did before. And just inside of the album itself, take a look at the buttons down at the bottom, how that liquid glass just reflects off of those colors. So this is the Lustra wallpaper pack. All these wallpapers is what you'll get if you go down to the link in the description and pick up this wallpaper pack. But this just looks amazing just scrolling over it in the Photos app. And if you select multiple photos and then you go to the share sheet right here, you can see that we have a new design for the share sheet, but also we have a new option for create photo shuffle wallpaper. And when you tap on that, that will create a new wallpaper that shuffles between the wallpapers or the photos that you selected. Also in iOS 26, Photos can now identify specific concerts using metadata. So for example, you could see at this date and at this time, it knew just based off of that it was a Laney concert. So it knows exactly who the artist was. That was not a thing here, as you could see in iOS 18, but it gets even better. You can see also the new glyph down there for concerts. If you tap on Laney concerts, it will actually show you that exact one. So it will show you everything about the event that you were at. It shows it's a past event. It shows the date, the city, the details of exactly where it was. You can open up this in the music application, the venue, the top songs, everything. That is super cool. If you tap on the share sheet, there's a new glyph icon for AirDrop. So this is the old AirDrop icon on the left. Here's the new one on the right. And if I go to search for something in the Photos application, you can see that we can now change between photos and collections. This whole page looks a little bit different. It also now says some results may not appear up top, whereas before it showed it down here at the bottom. Also, if you search for specific videos in your camera collection, you'll now see more relevant video thumbnails. Also, the featured photos widget automatically automatically enters into spatial mode, like a spatial scene, and you can see it moving as you move your phone, which is really cool, really immersive. And you'll also notice the light refracting off of the edges of that widget along with all the other widgets and the app icons. This is a really subtle detail that you'll notice in iOS 26 with Liquid Glass. Just take a close look at like the preview icon. As I move my phone, take a look at the light changing direction based on how I'm changing and how I'm moving my phone. The music application gets some pretty big changes with iOS 26, and that starts with auto mix. So this is a brand new feature in iOS 26 that basically transitions songs at the perfect moment into the next song. So take a look at when this song goes to the next song. You'll see that the album artwork starts to transition, and also there's text now at the bottom that says mixing. It's like your own personal DJ in your pocket. So you'll see that it starts saying mixing, and then it kind of goes in to the next song perfectly. And this works really well. It's kind of hard to, play the songs because it's copyright, but just try it out for yourself. There's also a setting for this if you head into your settings. If you go into music and then down to song transitions, you have auto mix, and it says songs transition at the perfect moment based on analysis of the key and tempo of the music. So this is much different and much better than crossfade, which didn't really use any type of machine learning for it. It just kind of faded into the next song. This actually uses machine learning to detect when there's blank space at the beginning or the end of a song, and it does a tremendous job of it. So a fun fact, a little tip is to just let the song play. Don't skip all the way till the end. It doesn't do as well when you do that. Now, when you do go into here, you'll see that we have a new icon here. This is the auto mix icon right there. Also, you can see that the buttons have a new look here in iOS 26, again, kind of adopting that Liquid Glass design. And if you tap on the three dots over here on the top right, you can see that we have a new look for the pop-out menu, the contextual menu. Also, favorite is now up top, whereas before it was all the way down here. It also now says add up top instead of add to library right there. And let's go back to our library because we also have a pretty big change right here. And you might notice this right away with iOS 26 here on the right, and that is that we now have pinned music. So the playlist, the songs, the albums, everything I listen to the most, I now pin them up here, just like you could do in the messages application. So let's say, for example, this song I like to play a lot. So if I tap and hold on that, we now get a new option to pin that album. So now if I do that, actually I just reached the maximum of 6. So let's go ahead and remove one. Let's tap on the three dots right here, and we have a new edit pins option. So now I can remove this song or that album or playlist, and now I can go here, go to this, and then go to pin album, and now it shows up top for quick and easy access. And you can take this even further as well, because when you tap and hold on one of these, we now have a new option for tap action. So now you can choose that when you tap on that pinned item up there, do you want it to just play it right away? Do you want it to shuffle right away? Or do you want to open up the playlist right away? So I'm going to do shuffle. So now every time I tap on that, it will just automatically shuffle that playlist. And you can see it actually added a glyph icon to the left of it as well to indicate it will shuffle when I tap on it. You could also now create folders for playlists or albums. So if I go down here, you could see I created a folder called parties. I'll go ahead and create a new one. So we'll tap on this plus right here, and it says create new playlist or create new folder. So I'll go to create new folder. I'll just name it something random. I'll tap on create, and now it opens this up. And from here, I can add in specific playlists, or I can create a new one. And if I wanted to add some playlists to that folder, I could just go ahead and tap and hold on it right here. And I could go to move to folder, and I could go down here and choose the new folder that I just created right there, and I can move it. Also new in iOS 26 are lyrics, translations, and pronunciations. So this one, for example, explains how to pronounce these words that are in a different language. And here's an example of a song that's playing in Spanish, and you can see we get this new translate option down here in the bottom left, and this will allow us to show or hide the translation and also show or hide the pronunciation. So now when I start playing this, it will show me down at the bottom that exact translation for those lyrics, along with any type of pronunciation that I might not know how to say. Also now when you open up the AirPlay menu at the bottom, so if we go ahead and tap on that, it looks a lot better now in iOS 26. iOS 18 had all these weird underlines, especially this big thick one right there, and it showed all of our items right there. Now it's a lot more consolidated, so it just shows our iPhone speaker, it shows our TV, and if you want to see more, we can tap on show more, and then it will pop up and show us more options. Also down here at the bottom, it now shows all speakers and TV, whereas before it said control other speakers and TVs. And And even that menu looks a lot better now. It's a little bit more spaced out, but it looks better than what iOS 18 had over here on the left. And you might have also noticed that you could change the volume from this section as well. So if you had this playing on a couple of different HomePods, you can use this as a volume slider as well. We finally have fast forwarding for Apple Music. So now if you press and hold on the, play next button right here, it will fast forward that song. For some reason, that was not a thing in iOS 18. So if I tap and hold right there, nothing happens. There's a slight change to the animation when you tap on the favorite button right here. So you can see before it was a little bit more animated. It moved a little bit slower when you pressed favorite. Now with iOS 26, when you press on that, you could see it just goes a little bit quicker. So it's a little bit more subtle than it was before. You do also get haptic feedback. Oh, and also when you're in the queue, the top little grabber right there is a little bit longer than it was before in iOS 18 to indicate you could pull this down to go back to the previous page. The Apple Music replay now works in app. So before in iOS 18, when you had your replay where it showed you like your most played songs of the month or of the year, it would take you to a web version of Apple Music. But now in iOS 26, when you tap on that, you can see you have a whole integration here in Apple Music. It doesn't take you to kind of a web version anymore. And it's fully interactive. It's much better, just works much better, and it looks much better in general. You could go back to the months and see that your most played songs for that month, what they are, and how many, listens you had, along with the years. You can go back to like 2021, for example, and see your top artists of that year and your top songs and top albums. There's now a widget for your home screen for your pinned music. So there's two sizes. There's that one and there's this large one right here. That's what they look like on the home screen. There's a new section in the music settings called lyrics, and it says larger text. Choose whether lyrics or pronunciation is shown larger when both appear. So you could choose that to be lyrics or pronunciation, whichever one you want to, focus on. You can make those larger. And if you go into your settings and go down to sounds and haptics, we now have reduce loud sounds right here. So it says reduces audio volume range and creates softer sound effects while maintaining the quiet details of the original audio. And also in this section, we have input right here. So you could change the input to be just automatic using the iPhone microphone, or if you have something else connected, you could choose to have that as the default input as well. That was not an option before. And if we head into our accessibility settings, we also have some things related to music. So if we go down here to music haptics, before in iOS 18, when you went into music haptics, it was just simply an on or off switch. That was it. But now in iOS 26, we have several additional options. So you can customize to the full mix or just the vocals, and you can change the intensity. So do you want the vibrations to be light, medium, or strong? And then here's a setting that's kind of hidden in iOS 26 that's actually very useful and something I've been waiting on for quite some time. So if you go into your settings and go to general, and then go down here until you get to AirPlay and continuity, and right here we have a brand new toggle called keep audio with headphones. And it says, when using AirPods or other wireless headphones, keep your audio with the headphones when other devices like speakers or cars connect to iPhone. So basically, if you have your AirPods in your ears and you get into the car or you connect to another Bluetooth device, instead of automatically switching over to the car or automatically switching over to a speaker or a HomePod, it will keep that audio in your headphones despite connecting to another Bluetooth device. I think for delivery drivers especially, this is going to be a must enable toggle. Now let's head into the podcast application because we have some changes in here as well. So of course we have that liquid glass design at the bottom, just like in every application. Also, you can see that browse is now new. So when you go to there, it also now says new at the top instead of browse. And when you go into an episode, we have a few changes here as well. So the grabber up top, just like with music, is now longer on iOS 26 than it was on iOS 18. And when you tap on the speed of the show, if you want to increase the speed to like 1.5x or 1.2x, whatever, we now have new options. So this is a whole new menu here, and there are multiple changes. So number one, we have enhanced dialogue. This is a new feature in podcasts that allows you to enhance the dialogue. So if there's background music or the audio quality just isn't great, enhanced dialogue will make it so that the people talking sound much more clear than they did before. It actually works really well. And then right below that, we have adjust playback speed. Before, we just had a simple little menu here to choose the playback speed that we wanted. We tapped on it, it went away. And if you wanted to change it, you had to kind of tap on it again to change it. But now with iOS 26, you could see that you not only have these custom options in here, so like 0.8x, you can get really specific specific, but also you can swipe for more speeds. And this turns into a little slider right here with a bunny and a turtle indicating faster or slower. And once you set the playback speed, and if you want enhanced dialogue on or off, we now have custom settings on a per show basis. So if you listen to different shows at different speeds based on the narrator's way they speak and how fast they speak, you might want to have one episode faster or slower than another. You can now save that for this episode or for this podcast. So now if I save this for My First Million, any podcast episode I listen to of My First Million, it's going to remember that these are my custom settings. And it even says it right there as well. It says using custom show settings at the bottom. And if you wanted to reset that, it says reset to defaults right here. And once again, just like in other applications, when you tap on the three dots right here, the menu looks much better. The contextual menu looks much better with the glyph icons to the left, and it's also more condensed. And when you tap on the show to go into the show notes, we have a brand new UI here as well. So it's more focused on the actual show notes. So you can see the play up there is up in the top left now. This whole UI looks very different from iOS 18. Also, you can see how the show notes look right here. And if we go down to hosts and guests, you can see very similar right there, but everything above that is much different looking. And when you go to the library, all of the glyph icons to the left are slightly thinner than they were previously on iOS 18. Also, the recently updated text is just slightly smaller. And when you haptic press on a show, we have a slightly different contextual menu here as well, along with it just says unfollow now instead of unfollow show. And when you go to a show's page, the latest episodes button is now more circular than it was before. And if you press on the arrow next to episodes, you can see that played is right above subscriber episodes, but now you can see downloaded has been moved in between those two. So basically played has just been moved up a notch, and also there's now a glyph icon to the left of all episodes. Before, there was no glyph icon whatsoever. We have some nice changes to AirPods with iOS 26. So when you launch up your AirPods for the first time, you will see that we get some new features here. So this is the splash screen when you first install the update on your AirPods and on your iPhone. So we now have charging reminders, which I showed you previously. You will now get a reminder, a notification on your phone when your AirPods battery is running low. Also, your AirPods will now pause media on sleep. So it's now going to detect when you fall asleep and automatically pause your music or whatever you're listening to. Also, camera control. So you can now use gestures on the AirPods to control your camera. So basically you can press in on the stem to take a photo. And if you go into your AirPods settings, we have a few changes in here. So before it said noise control, now it says listening mode. Also, these are more circular instead of square, just like with liquid glass. If we scroll down, this is where we have the camera control camera remote. So that is off by default. But if you go ahead into that, you can see that you can take a picture by pressing once on the stem of your AirPod, or if you want to press and hold to take a picture. And you could also set it to start and stop a video recording as well. Anyways, if we go down to the audio section, you can see that this text is much larger than it was in iOS 18. It's easier to read the descriptions of these. And if you go into adaptive audio, the customized adaptive audio header is bigger. We have a slightly different slider there as well with blue instead of just being all white before. It also used to say less noise default and more noise. Now it doesn't say anything. There's also a battery section right here. So if you go into that, that will show your charging notifications. That is something you definitely want to keep on, and also optimize battery charging. And then also the glyph icon to the left of the AirPods has slightly changed in iOS 26. It's now a little bit darker than it was before. We also have live translation for the AirPods Pro 2, AirPods Pro 3, and the AirPods 4 with active noise cancellation. So Apple did announce this with the AirPods Pro 3, but it will also work on the other devices I just mentioned. It's also much easier now to update your AirPods to the beta software. It's now actually inside of your settings. So I'm on the beta right now, so it doesn't show it, but you will see that up top now where you can go ahead and enroll in the beta program for AirPods. And if I put an AirPod in my ear and then I go down to sounds and haptics and we go to input, this is where you can change the input for your built-in microphone. So you could change it right here to always be the AirPods, or if you want it to be the iPhone microphone, even with your AirPods in, you can do that as well. You could also do this from the control center. Now, speaking of music and audio, we also have some new ringtones with iOS 26. And I know I'm not somebody who typically uses ringtones, but the iOS 26 ringtones are easily my favorite that Apple have ever included in iOS. So if you go into our settings, and then we're going to go down here to sounds and haptics, and we're going to go into ringtone. So right here on this screen, we do have Little Bird as a new one, but also under reflection, we now have a drop-down menu. So if you tap on that, you have several basically variations or remixes of reflection. So I'll let you hear a little bit bit of each of these and you tell me which one's your favorite. I think my favorite's going to be Dreamer. And then here is Little Bird. Now here's a good one. So with iOS 26, you can now set a custom ringtone without needing to go into GarageBand. So pretty much for the past several years, the only way you can create a custom ringtone with a sound that you have downloaded was through the GarageBand application. It was very tedious and it was very annoying, but now with iOS 26, that is resolved. So if you go ahead, if you have some audio right here and you haptic press on it and tap on share to go into the share sheet, you should see it down here by default. If you don't, just tap on the more right there and you will see that we have a brand new option for use as ringtone. Now, of course, this sound will need to be under 30 seconds, so you will need to trim it with like a GarageBand or something like that. But once you do that, you are able to save it as a ringtone on your device. If we head into the health application, we have a couple of nice changes here. So first off, we now have a sleep score. So if you're somebody like me who tracks their sleep every night, you will now get a sleep score that basically combines 3 important stats. So the duration of your sleep, your bedtime, and how many interruptions you had, and that will give you a score out of 100. The higher, the better. So mine said very few wake ups helped you score a 74. Nice one. And then right under that, it shows my sleep. You can also tap on this to see more information about that sleep score. You can also show in charts to see how your sleep score has done over the past week, month, or 6 months. There's also hypertension notifications. So hypertensions are essentially signs of chronic high blood pressure. So what this does is it uses optical heart sensors, the optical heart sensor in your watch, to analyze blood vessel responses. And if you have any type of abnormality, it will tell you if you have, potential hypertension. And this is only available on the Apple Watch Series 9 and later. This is something Apple showed off with the Apple Watch Series 11, but it will work on the past few watches. Now, if we head into the fitness application, we have a couple of changes in here. So first off, you can see that summary up in the top left, it now shows the date smaller and below summary. Before, it was much larger text and it was above summary. But most importantly, we have a brand new tab at the bottom. So you can see that these are also lighter instead of being gray. They're more like a white now, but there's a brand new tab down here for workouts. And if you go into this, what this does is it essentially turns your iPhone into a big Apple Watch. So you can set workouts straight from this screen. So if your outdoor walk, your outdoor cycle, all of those right here, and you can change if you want the autoplay media to be on. You can turn on the workout buddy and choose your voice right there. And then you also have your, duration, your distance, your quick start, all of that right there. You can just tap on play and it will start that workout as if you were on your watch doing it. It's pretty cool. And this is what the UI looks like for that as well. You can swipe up to get these other options for that workout. So we have some really nice changes to the wallet application. I'm somebody with an Apple Card and somebody who uses Apple Pay pretty much every single time I buy anything. So big changes here in iOS 26. Starting off with the overall UI. So you can see up in the top right, we now have a search option. So if you go into that, that allows you to search everything in your wallet. And if you tap on the 3 dots, the glyph icons are now to the left instead of to the right. Also, we now have autofill right there. We have expired and we have notifications. And if you tap on autofill, you get this new splash screen right here that tells you what it does. And if you tap on continue, that will allow you to input your, autofill settings for each card right there. And if you tap on the plus, we have a new UI here. So this looks a little bit different. We also have pay later options down at the bottom, along with cards found for you from other devices. Whereas before it just said previous cards. And then if we go into notifications, this allows you to see your notification settings, whereas before you had to go into your actual settings and you would see these kind of just spread throughout, but now you have a dedicated notification section in the actual settings. From here, you can change if you want notifications for all of these options. And also with iOS 26, if you tap on the plus and you go to driver's license and ID cards, you can now create a digital ID by simply scanning your passport right in the wallet app. But let's get to the good stuff here, because with iOS 26, we have a pretty big change to order tracking. So if you guys know, in iOS 18, we did have order tracking, but it was very hit or miss, and it only worked with very few merchants. But now with iOS 26, order tracking is way better. So if you tap on the three dots right here and go into orders, you can see right away that I have several different orders that were found here from Amazon, from Chewy, from Petco, and you can see the order number and everything. And right underneath of that, you will see how these have been put in here automatically, because it says found in mail. So yes, with iOS 26, your device will now use Apple Intelligence to find orders in your email and automatically add them into the wallet application, so you can track their status to see when your package is going to be delivered. Like you can see this one, for example, it shows that it was shipped via FedEx, and it shows me the tracking ID, and also it shows the related email where it pulled that information from. I can even tap on that to go into the email. And you can tap on these three dots if you want to mark it as complete, if you want to mute notifications, or if you just want to delete the order. But here's an even more useful feature. So if you go into a card that is not like your Apple card, so I'll go into my American Express card, for example, and I tap on the little card information up top right there. If I tap on that and put in my Face ID, we now have a new option to add physical card information. This is so useful because what it does is it allows you to insert your card details. That way, anytime you don't have your card near you, you can go into here and see your card number, your expiration, everything without needing the physical card anymore. Now, if you have an Apple card, you're going to love this update even more, because in the wallet application with an Apple card, if you go to a transaction, so we'll just go to a random transaction right here, we'll go to this one, you can see that now with iOS 26, you can manually change the category of that purchase. So now if I want to change this, if Apple got it wrong and it's not shopping, it's rather entertainment, I can change that. And then once you do change it, it says you can change it for this transaction only, or you can select multiple transactions to change to be that manually selected category. Now you might also notice a change when you go to look at your monthly, weekly, or yearly charts. So for September 2025, you can see that basically everything looks similar right now, but the daily cash icon is different. It looks a little bit different than before. And if we go down here to categories, you can see that before it just said categories or show merchants. Now it says by category or by merchant. You can kind of choose between the two. And if we go to make a payment on our card, we have a slight change here as well. So first off, you can see up top that the font and the text size has changed for choose amount and the make payments by. And then beneath that, where it says pay August balance, that's now left aligned instead of being centered. I guess the top is left aligned as well instead of being centered, but also you can see other amounts is right there underneath of learn more, whereas before that was all the way down here at the bottom middle. And if you tap on schedule to schedule that payment, we have a different pop-up menu right here. It looks a lot better and a lot more modern. And if we go ahead and tap on pay, you can see this also looks a little bit different. It's more rounded off. You could also now use Apple Pay rewards in store. You'll also now see detailed transaction history for connected accounts in Wallet. We also have several boarding pass enhancements. So if you add your boarding pass to your Apple Wallet, you can see this is what the new design looks like. It's also more interactive now. So there's indoor maps that you can access from the boarding pass, along with Find My from the boarding pass. You also have live activities for flights now. So if you're somebody who used Flighty in the past or an airline in the past, you can now get live activities for flights just built in to iOS 26. Apple Maps gets a nice update with iOS 26. So we do have a new UI. You can see that the weather is now up in the top left as well versus down in the bottom right before. Also, the menu options are down in the bottom right instead of in the top right like before. And right away up top, we have places and we also have recents. Both of those now have an arrow to the right of it instead of before. It just showed it and you had to tap on more all the way to the right of the screen. If you input a location that you want to travel to in iOS 26, first off, you can see the binoculars down in the bottom left are darker now and it's a more circular icon. Also, you can see that the name of the destination you're trying to go to, City Walk in this example, it's now centered instead of before it was left aligned and it just kind of looked a little bit messy. Now it looks a lot cleaner. right there. The more option is no longer there. And then underneath it shows the hours, the ratings, it accepts, and also the miles. So that's also center aligned instead of left aligned. And if you scroll down, the images are now more circular. They're not as like long rectangles like they were before. Also underneath of this, instead of rate this place, it now says ratings. Also, it shows the percentage big over here to the right instead of small underneath of overall right here. Also, the thumbs up and thumbs down are missing. It's now just a button that says rate this place. So it's much easier to do. Instead of just tapping on this, you can see that this is what it looked like before. And now this is what it looks like in iOS 26. Also, Apple has combined the rating with add a photo, since typically you want to do both in the same run. Before, you could see that they were separated. And if you scroll down to the hours, it now says hours instead of details. And also by default, it's already, spread out. You don't have to collapse the menu. It's already collapsed for you. So that's also a little quality of life change right there. And then underneath of hours, we have details, and that's where it shows the phone number, the website, and the address. Again, this is more nicely laid out where it shows the headers to the left and then the information over here to the right. Whereas before, it was just kind of all stacking on top of each other. And then also the buttons at the bottom are also cleaner. So report an issue, pin, and claim this place. And then all the way at the bottom, you have another chance to save it, to favorite it, to rate it, or you have these three dots where you can do any of these things right here. And if you start the navigation, we have a slightly new UI. Also, share ETA pops up down at the bottom for about 15 seconds before it goes away, just reminding you that it is there. And on the right-hand side, we can report an incident. Before, you had to tap down here and then go to report an incident, and you only had crash, speed check, and hazard. Now you also have road work, road closure, and traffic. The glyph icons are also different down in the bottom. So add a stop no longer has the background around it. Share ETA is down there. Report an incident has a different glyph icon, and also voice volume is now voice controls, and it's also a slightly different glyph. And it also shows you in this menu the arrival time, the amount of time left, and the amount of miles remaining. Before, it just showed the arrival underneath of the destination right here. Now, one of the big features in iOS 26 that's going to make your life a lot easier is called preferred routes. So what this does is your iPhone learns the routes that you take between places that you frequently visit, like when you go from home to work or from home to the gym. It learns those routes. That way, it can basically show you where you're going to go before you even go there. It's kind of like Siri suggestions, but it's now better. And that kind of works hand in hand with this Maps widget that shows a preview of your commute, so you know what to expect before you leave. So if you're going to leave somewhere, if your phone detects that you leave, at the same time every day to go to a certain place, if you have this Maps widget, it will already show you a preview of your commute when that time comes, so you can see if there's going to be traffic or not. And you'll also get a notification if significant delays are detected before you leave, and also offer you an alternate route before you even start to leave. Again, these are features that you're going to just kind of have to use, and your phone's going to have to learn for a few months, and then you'll see how useful they are. Now, also, if you go into the places right here, we have a new one called visited places. So you can see this is in beta, but this is something new with iOS 26 that will show you the places that you visited. So basically, it detects places that you frequently visit, and they can be viewed in this places library, and you can share these with a tap. It actually breaks it down by category as well. So leisure, dining, shopping. It breaks it down by city, by how many visits you've had. So I've had 102 visits, and you can see my top ones right here. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can even see it by the month and by the year. You could also change if you want to keep the visits forever, if you want to clear the history, and you could also search places that you've been. And these visits are built with privacy in mind. So these cannot be accessed by Apple, and they can easily be removed with just this tap of clear history. If we head into the Safari application, we could see some changes here pretty much right away. So again, with the liquid glass, take a look down at the bottom, how much better liquid glass looks here versus iOS 18 with that tab bar in the bottom. Now also, when you start scrolling down, you can see that the navigation bar there, that whole bottom bar on iOS 26 shrinks, and it gets small, and it stays in its own little circle down there in the bottom until we start swiping up. And this is the new compact tab bar. And if you tap and hold on that, you can see you do get some additional options that you did not get in iOS 18. So from here, you have the option to close all tabs, close this tab. You also have switch tab groups. Before, we only had move tab group, and you can see the different ones right there. And you'll notice that we don't have the tabs down in the bottom right. So the way you get to that is the same way you could in iOS 18. You kind of just swipe up on the tab right there, and it will take you to all of your currently opened tabs. And you can see a difference here as well compared to iOS 18. So that bottom tab bar looks a lot more clean now than it did before. Also up top, you can see that our tab group is personal, and you can see it has an outline with a little drop down right there for us to change. Also, we have these 3 dots up in the top left-hand corner, and that gives us the option to change our profile. We also have our tab groups and other options. And you can also arrange the tabs by the title or by the website right there. We didn't have that option before. Also, if you input a long URL into the address bar, the text will now shrink to fit as much into the address bar as possible. Whereas before, you could see that it just took up the full width right there in iOS 18. So the longer the URL, the smaller this text will be to fit it all in there. And if you tap on these 3 dots, that's how you can access the tabs as well, your bookmarks and all of your other options right there. Now you can change, like I said, the address bar if we go into our settings. So in our Safari settings, if we go down, we now have different tab views. So compact is the new default for iOS 26, but you can change it to bottom or top. When you open up a link from a third-party application and it takes you to this mini Safari view right here, we have some slight changes. So the reload used to be up in the top right. Now it's down here in the bottom right. And if we go ahead and tap on the little summary up in the top right, so you can see that the summary looks a little bit different. It's a little bit cleaner now in iOS 26. Also, translate to Spanish is right there. And we also have show reader all the way at the bottom now, whereas before it was right underneath of the summary. Also, the actions like share, reload, and open in Safari are down here in the bottom right now in their own little section, whereas before they were a little bit spread out. If you go into picture-in-picture mode, we now have a change to the design. So it has that liquid glass design for all of the playback options along with the X. And also if you want to go back to being out of picture-in-picture mode, that has that liquid glass design as well. If you go to create a web application to your home screen, so if you go to add to home screen, you can see we have a new UI here. Also, we have a brand new toggle that says open as web app. So you could open it as a web app, or you could just open it up straight to Safari. That's a new toggle there. There's also one-time password support for third-party applications. It's not just for first-party apps anymore. Also in iOS 26, Safari is going to enable the advanced fingerprinting protection feature by default for all browsing sessions, including incognito windows. And basically this feature introduces data noise and other techniques to confuse trackers, making it harder for them to uniquely identify users based on device configurations. And you can see this if you go into your settings, Safari Advanced, and you have advanced tracking and fingerprinting protection right there. This is now on by default, but you can turn it off if you want to, or if you just want to change it to private browsing or all browsing. Also in iOS 26, there's a great new hidden feature where you can now swipe back to go back through menus like in your settings or anywhere else. You don't have to be at the edge of the screen anymore. In iOS 18, you had to be at the edge of the screen to go back. Now you can do it from anywhere on the screen, even if you're all the way over to the right. Super useful. We have a couple of minor changes in the passwords application. So if we go into one of our saved passwords, so we'll just go into this one right here, for example, you can see that we now have notes right here underneath of modified. Before, if you wanted to get to notes, you had to go to edit first, and then you had notes down here. Now also, we have history. This is very useful. So if you tap on view history, it will show you every time that the password was changed. So for example, this one is yellow and it says password changed 3 months ago. If I tap on this little arrow, it shows me what the new password is. And here's what the password was before that, along with the history right here as well. So it shows those passwords that were changed at what time. You can also now move passwords to a group by tapping on the share sheet right here and then go to move to group, and you can change it to a new group that you have, and you could also stop sharing. Also for this password group, you could see it now shows one item right here underneath of the title of this group. Before it did not say that. It actually showed it down here all the way at the bottom middle, but now it shows it right up there small underneath of the main header. Also before we had that little glyph that was blue for selecting. Now we just have this white select option. And there's there's even an animation to go along with it. Take a look at the bottom tab bar, how it kind of jiggles every time I press select. And in the settings for passwords, we have a new toggle down here for allow contacting websites. That was not there before. And it says passwords can privately contact websites to show names and icons for apps and websites you have saved items for, and to inform you when a website supports passkeys. And if you go into privacy and security in your settings, we now have a section for blocked contacts where it shows all of our blocked contacts. Also in iOS 26, parents can now move kids to child accounts more easily and take advantage of a wide set of parental controls to keep your kids safe. Also down here under the security section, we have wired accessories. You can now choose what you want to do when accessories connect to your device or when you connect to another device. So you could automatically allow when unlocked or any of these others. The Notes application gets some nice changes with iOS 26. So first off, we do have that liquid glass redesign here with all of the UI elements throughout. Also, you can see that we're in a folder right now and it shows 10 notes underneath of the title of this folder, which is K. Before it was down in the bottom center. And if I go into a note, you can see the toolbar down at the bottom now floats and it's over in the bottom left, whereas before it was just fixed to the bottom like so. And take a look at the animation at the bottom. When I tap into the note, you can see it's a different animation than it was before. And this toolbar now scrolls. So before you kind of just saw everything right there, or you'd have to tap on like the A's to get to additional menus. You couldn't swipe, but now with iOS 26, you can swipe on this and you can continue to go down and you can see you can make things bold easier. There's also a different animation when you tap on these as well. And you can scroll down and you can see even more options right there. It's just really nice that this is scrollable now and you get a lot more options and functionality than before where you just had this. Also take a look at the return key. So before it just said return, now we have just a little arrow icon instead of saying return. If we select some text and open up the contextual menu, before you could just swipe over and get to all these options. Even when you tapped on the arrows, all it did was just take you over in that little mini menu. Now in iOS 26, this doesn't actually scroll. You have to tap on this and it opens up a new little share sheet here. Not a share sheet, but this is a new little modal for your contextual menu where you have other options and it's just better laid out. It's a lot easier to figure out what you're doing now than having to scroll all the way down to the end to get to something. Everything is better laid out in iOS 26. You could also now export to Markdown. So if you go ahead to the share sheet, we now have a brand new option to export as Markdown. And in previous versions of iOS, we would always use the Notes application to kind of mark up and edit PDF documents, but not anymore with iOS 26 because we have a brand new first-party application called Preview. Yes, the same Preview from macOS. So this is a new application on the iPhone for viewing and editing PDFs, and it's much better than Notes. So this is the screen you're presented with at first, and you can see it just says Preview, New Document, or Scan Documents. So if you go to New Document, you could create a new one, or you could select something from your iCloud Drive down here. So here's what it looks like when you load up a PDF, and you have all your options down here at the bottom. If you want to autofill, if you want to add in, markup for text or signatures, you could do all that. And now you have a dedicated app for PDFs. The journal application gets some much needed updates with iOS 26. So first off, we have a brand new starting page now in iOS 26. Before it just started off at this journal page where it showed you your journal entries this year, words written and days journaled, along with a plus down there. But now in iOS 26, it starts with insights. It shows how many entries this year. It just shows those things that it showed before, just in a new layout. And it also now adds places. Also, you can see you can now have different journals. So if you maybe have, some personal thoughts, but also some work thoughts, and you want to separate those into separate journals, you can do that by tapping on this plus right here, and you can create a new journal name with a custom color and icon. But if we go into our journal, you can see some differences here right away. So first off, the plus is no longer big and in the middle. It's now a little bit smaller and over there to the right. Also, the search and the three dots are now higher up on the top right. And if we actually go into one of these journal entries, you can see how it opens up. So it opens up just like that. Before, it actually would not open up unless you tapped on the three dots and then went to edit. So it's much easier to get into editing a journal now than it was before. And this just gives you a seeing view, like a preview. You do have to tap on edit afterwards, but at least you could actually see the full text. Whereas before, you couldn't see anything. Like if you tapped on it, nothing happened. And if we tap on the plus to create a new journal entry, there are some changes here as well. So before, it was kind of a little bit convoluted here. There was a lot to choose from. You had to tap again on new entry up top to actually start typing something. It just gave you a lot of recommendations and it was kind of distracting, honestly. But now you can see it starts off much cleaner up top where you could just simply start writing and add a title if you want to. You don't have to tap new entry again to get to that point. And we also now have markup in this section. So you can now mark up on your journal entry. You couldn't do that before. And when you tap on the three dots, you now have the option to select entries. You could select multiple entries at once. For some reason, you could not do that before. And of course, you can now see your entries on a map as well. So if you add location to your journal entries, you now have this places view like I mentioned earlier. And if you tap on that, this will show you where your journal entries were written, where you had that location set. The reminders application also has a nice update here with iOS 26. It's a lot more visually appealing now with this update, as you could already tell right off the bat. So your today, scheduled, flagged, all these views are now color coordinated. Also up top, you can see we now have the search and also where we can add a new list. Before it was just the three dots right there. And when you tapped on those, that was just for editing lists and seeing your templates. And if we go to create a new reminder, it's now in the bottom right. It's just a simple plus. Before it was down in the bottom left and it said new reminder. So when you tap on that, you'll see that we do have a little bit more here now. So we do have a default section here for URL. Also the date and time now has these toggles where you can select those and insert a date or a time. Before you had to go into details, and that's when you had all these additional options. So it took an extra step before, but now it's right here. Also you can see for list, it now has a little icon for what list it is right there. And if you go into that, it will show this. And then you also have details where you can see some of the additional settings in this section. Also, you'll notice that add image now has a glyph icon to the left, whereas before it did not, and it was also blue before. We do also have places and people right here for location and when messaging. Before, those are right here, but it did not say places and people above it, nor did we have organization right there. So everything's broken down and a little bit easier to understand now in this detail section. And then here's a big new feature in iOS 26. So we now have auto categorize for our reminders lists. So for example, I have a list here of some common items for a trip. And before, we've had something similar where your device would basically be able to detect, like with grocery lists, what category they belong to. Now you can do something similar with a list by tapping on the three dots, and we now have an Apple Intelligence feature called Auto Categorize. Now, when we tap on Auto Categorize, it's going to, kind of read through these and figure out what category each of these belongs in. So you can see it automatically categorized everything now by beverages and snacks, electronics and accessories, personal care, and others. Super cool, very useful. And if you don't like what it spits out, you can also tap right here and you can turn it off if you would like to. And if we go into one of these items and tap on the eye and go to our date and time, say something is due at a specific time, you can see that now with iOS 26, you can specify the time zone that that item is due. You could also now quickly add reminders from your control center, your action button, or from your lock screen, the little widgets down here on your lock screen. So I'll show you how to do it right here. If you go into your settings and go to action button, and then you go over to controls right here and you choose a control. This is what you see in the control center as well. If you just search for reminders, we now have a quick toggle to add a new reminder quickly. So now if I go ahead into my action button and press it, you can see it will open up the reminders right here, and I can set up a new reminder straight from my dynamic island. And if you have an Apple Intelligence device, reminders can now suggest tasks, grocery items, and follow-ups based on emails or other text that's on your device. The Shortcuts application has a slightly new look thanks to that liquid glass. Like always throughout iOS, you can see the bottom and up top. Also here, if we go to create a new shortcut, number one, that animation is new. Number two, you can see up top, it now shows purple as the default icon instead of blue. Also, search actions right here is now left aligned instead of centered. And we also have our dictation right there. We could not dictate before. We have brand new Apple Intelligence actions that can be very powerful when you use them the right way in shortcuts. And this is called use model. So what this does is it allows you to use different Apple Intelligence models. So you could use the cloud model, the on-device model, or you can use ChatGPT's model in your shortcuts. And if you tap on the eye, it will tell you a little bit more about these and how they're useful. And we also have writing tools. So if you search for writing tools, you can see your different writing tools options. And then if we scroll down, we do also have a action here for the image playground. If you want to use image playground in your shortcuts, it's right here. And there's even an action for open visual intelligence if you want to do that, which visual intelligence, if you're not aware, is if you have the camera control and you press and hold on that, it will launch visual intelligence if you have it enabled. In the Files application, you can now customize the folder. So take a look at this Apple CarPlay folder. It's yellow with a starry eye in it, and you can actually customize that. So if you haptic press on a folder and then go down, we now have customize folder and tags. And if you go into that, that's where you can choose the icon you want and also the color that you want that folder to turn along with the tag. And you can see down here, you can choose between different emojis you want in there as well, just like you can do on macOS. And if you haptic press on a file, we have open with right here, and you can see that we now have an option to preview with quick look. So you can make the default open with when you tap on it just be a quick look where it gives you a preview like pressing space on a Mac. And you might also see collapsible folders for specific folders inside of files where you can just press the down arrow right here to see all the contents inside without having to go actually into the folder. The clock application has some changes in iOS 26, starting with a much different app icon now versus iOS 18 and previous iOS versions. And then we go into the clock, we have some changes here as well. So if we go to the alarms page right here, when you swipe over, you can see that the delete button is now circular and it's a trash icon instead of saying delete. And if we go to create a new alarm, you can see that we have a brand new option to set a custom snooze duration instead of the default. So you can do this all the way from 1 minute until 15 minutes. And if we go into our wake up alarm, we have some changes here. So first off, the dominant color is now purple. Before it was like this teal kind of light blue green color, but now it's purple throughout. Also underneath of 12 a.m., it used to have blue sparkles. Now it's a purple moon. And if we set a quick timer here, we're going to try this on the home screen and also on the lock screen. You will see a change in the timer interface. So now it shows the little refresh or the redo button right there and the X on the right side, whereas before it was flip-flopped. Timer was on the right and those buttons were on the left. And if we do the same thing on our lock screen, take a look at the difference on our lock screen from iOS 18 to iOS 26. So the timer is much larger now. We have an animated little alarm clock going off right there. It's gray, it's above the time, which shows up really big. Before, this kind of hid your time, so now it's more obvious. Also, the repeat and stop buttons are significantly larger than they were before, and they're also together instead of being separate. The calendar application gets a few updates as well, so we can see that liquid glass design. We no longer have the red buttons up top. Everything is much more unified now and matching the rest of the OS. You'll see that as well down there at the bottom. We also no longer have inbox. It's now just a little inbox glyph icon with the number 2 next to it. And actually, if we tap on that, we can see some changes here as well because we have Siri suggestions right now because it found some flights in my email. So before you could see it actually showed the airline, so American Airlines, but now it actually just shows a Apple Intelligence icon. And you can see the add to calendar and ignore buttons now look a little bit different. In the App Store, aside from the liquid glass changes to the overall UI elements in the app, we also have the removal of the date up top. So before it showed today along with the date of today, but now it does not. It just says simply today. And you'll also notice that our profile picture is much larger than it was in iOS 18. The news application also gets the liquid glass effect down there at the bottom in the menu bar. And if we go to the following tab, this looks a lot cleaner now in iOS 26 as well, especially because the menu collapses and you have to tap on it again to pull up the nav bar. Notification summaries have returned in iOS 26 for news applications. So you can see that when you get a notification from a news application and you have this turned on, it will now say summarized by Apple Intelligence down at the bottom. There's another new app in iOS 26 called Games. So this is essentially just a glorified kind of mix between Apple Arcade and the Game Center application or the Game Center interface, but it's pretty cool. So if you're into gaming, there are some nice options here. So you have your home, you have arcade. So if you are an Apple Arcade subscriber, this is a great way to be able to get in here and see all of the games and, you know, some of the trending games as well. You have friends where you can see what your friends are up to. You have your library where you can see your games and your achievements. And then you have search over here where you can search for new games. If you are into gaming, definitely something to check out. The calculator application gets a few minor changes. So first off, you can see that we have a backspace button now. Before, we would not get a backspace until we type something in, and then we'd have to just backspace until it became AC. But now AC and backspace are separate, so we can clear all, you know, right here with one button, whereas before we could not do that. We had to hold on backspace. It was kind of hidden. And you can see we have a new icon up here in the top right. That is how we can change our calculator from basic to scientific, math notes, or a conversion calculator. Before, that was down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and a lot of people just simply didn't even know about it. Also, conversion Alert was just a toggle, whereas now it's a full selection there with a glyph icon next to it. And when you go to your calculator's history, this has a slightly different look as well with the X and the edit. There's also no clear button like there was before. You have to actually go into edit and then select, or you have the option to clear all right from the get-go. You did not have that before. You had to press edit right here, and you could see you had to delete them all individually. So it's nice now with a clear all button. And as always with Apple, there are a lot of new accessibility features and improvements with iOS 26. So this starts right here under the Vision page, which first off, you can see all of the headers there are just a little bit larger, but we do have something new here. So spoken content is now read and speak. And if we scroll down to physical and motor, we have a new option here for head tracking. So now with iOS 26, you can do head tracking. So it uses the camera to track the movement of your head to control a pointer on the screen. And it also tracks your facial movements to perform actions. So you can go ahead and enable that, and you will see that right there. And you can see that the actions are things like raise eyebrows. If you raise your eyebrows, it can do any of these, actions right here. It can single tap, it can press the action button based on detecting you raising your eyebrows. And you can do the same thing with open mouth, pucker your lips, and things like that. You could also change the pointer tracking mode if you want it to be, tracking with face relative to head or when facing screen edges, and you have snap to item, dwell control, all of that. So really great accessibility feature there that's new. It's kind of like a, alternate version to eye tracking. Now there's also an interesting feature called Accessibility Reader. This is a new system-wide reading mode that makes text easier to read for people who are blind, have low vision, or other reading related disabilities. Now here's something really cool with accessibility. You can now share your accessibility settings with another user or with another one of your devices if you're upgrading. So if you go all the way down to the bottom, we now have share accessibility settings, and you could also sync this to iCloud. So you can now sync your accessibility settings to iCloud, or you can go ahead and share, and you can airdrop your settings to another iPhone or another device. And if we go into the touch section and go down to back tap, we have a new UI for back tap. So before, if we tapped on it, you can see it was that white, really ugly icon, honestly. So every time we tapped on that, you would see that white banner. But now in iOS 26, it looks a lot better. It looks a lot more modern, and it matches the aesthetic of liquid glass, and just in general looks way better. And it has a glyph icon in there as well, instead of just being a white banner. And if we head into the audio and visual section, we have live listen, and you can have a remote control. So it says nearby iOS devices signed into your Apple account can control live listen and view session transcripts from this device. And inside of live captions, we have a new option for save call captions. You can save those captions now along with supported languages down here. And like I mentioned in the music section of this video, you could also customize your music haptics now. So if you use music haptics in Apple Music, you can customize these by intensity, and also if you want it to only be for the vocals or the full mix. The personal voice setup is a lot better with iOS 26. So if we go to create a new personal voice, you can see that first off, the splash screens here look a bit different. So it says read a set of 10 sentences aloud. Before, you had to read 150 phrases, which took about 15 minutes. So now setting up your personal voice is significantly faster than it was in iOS 18. And then we also have hover text right here, which allows you to basically see text larger. So now when you tap on it, it will show, like if you tap on this and then we tap, you can see it will show us what it says right there. So we have to tap and then tap again, and it will show us what that text says, because it is, as you hover over it, displaying that text in a large view. There's also now Braille access. So if you're somebody who uses Braille, it's much better now with iOS 26. And if you go to an app in the App Store, underneath of the app privacy, you now have an accessibility section. That is brand new. And if an application has accessibility features that the app supports, they will show up right here. And this is called accessibility nutrition labels. And if we go into motion right here and go into vehicle motion cues, you can now customize the appearance for vehicle motion cues. So you can change the color, you can make the dots larger, you could add more dots, and you can also change the pattern from regular to dynamic. And we do also have some nice CarPlay features as well. If you have a CarPlay enabled device, so you do have the liquid glass design, you have live activities, you have widgets, you can react with a tap back in messages, and more. So that is iOS 26, the biggest iOS redesign ever. And you will notice, even if you didn't think this was so big after just installing it and after just watching this video, after using the software for a few weeks or a few months, you will see how Liquid Glass just works so well on the iPhone. And every time I go back to iOS 18, since I have been using this since June, it just feels absolutely ancient. So just give Liquid Glass a chance. Don't give up on it right away. Of course, not everybody's going to love it, but I just think it works really well. And it's kind of the future of where Apple is going in terms of design language with their glasses, with their, Vision Pro. Just everything is moving towards this design for the next decade. Anyways, I've talked enough. I hope you guys enjoyed this long episode. As always, if you did, the best way to show appreciation and support for my channel is buying the wallpaper collections that I put together. That is what this wallpaper, all the wallpapers you've seen throughout this video, the reason that I make those is just to give you guys a chance to support me while I give you something in return. And those wallpapers were built from the ground up for Liquid Glass for iOS 26. So they're going to work really well with the software and future software versions as well. I think it's a great deal for the amount of wallpapers you get, because you do also get Mac wallpapers as well, 5K Mac wallpaper. So that link will be down in the description below. I appreciate it. I think you guys will love it regardless. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video as well. If you're not subscribed already, for some reason, I do these big mega deep dive movie videos every year that an iOS update comes out. So make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss out on the iOS 27 updates when that comes around, because I'll still be here. I'll still be kicking. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon.